When learning a trade, there's a fairly standard progression from apprentice to journeyman and eventually to master. To become a master craftsman, your work must exhibit not only an in-depth knowledge of materials, techniques, and methods, but most importantly, a real sense of artistry. There are few trades in which the artistry of the master craftsman is more apparent than in the Japanese art of urushi lacquer. This centuries-old art form involves coating objects with the toxic sap from the Toxicodendron vernicifluum tree, also known as the Chinese lacquer tree or the Japanese sumac. Applied in layer upon layer of built-up lacquer, the urushi must be dried and cured at very specific levels of heat and humidity, which results in a durable and glossy finish. But in the hands of a true master, urushi moves far beyond a simple coating and becomes a real work of art. It is this artistry that has made urushi-coated pens both highly prized and pretty expensive. The pen in today's review is a perfect example of that kind of artistry. Hello everybody, welcome to The Pen Habit. My name's Matt Armstrong. Glad to have you back for another pen review video. Now, the pen for today's review is a pen from the company Danitrio. I've heard it pronounced Danitrio, but I don't believe that is the correct pronunciation because the company used to be known just as Dani. They added the trio later on to become Danitrio. Now, Danitrio, when they first started, had a lot of kind of a wide range of pens. It's never been your traditional manufacturer where they've done huge runs or have standard production line pens. They've always done smaller runs and special limited edition, things like that. But they had kind of a higher end and a lower end before. And they started back in the mid-70s. In the 90s, they kind of changed direction, stopped manufacturing a lot of their less expensive pens, and started focusing very heavily on what I call the art pen market. So these are pens that are many, many hundreds, even many thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars in some case. Beautiful, hand-painted, usually made of ebonite, sometimes wood or other materials, but usually ebonite, which are then sent over to Japan and lacquered with urushi or makie or many of those types of techniques. So the pen in question for today is the Danitrio Takumi Tsugaru-nuri Kara-nuri. So let me break down that name a little bit. So the naming convention has a lot to do, I think, with the way that Danitrio runs, manages their stock and their inventory. One person on the Fountain Pen Network put it this way. He said, the craftsmen at Danitrio make a pen until they're tired of making it, and then they just don't make it anymore. I don't know how true that is, but I will say that this is not the kind of company where you just go buy, where they're going to have 1,000 of one thing made. It's very, very small numbers. So you may not be able to find this exact pen, but you should be able to find quite a bit like it. Now, the breakdown. As far as I've been able to tell from my research online, Takumi is the name of this particular shape. It comes in both rounded end and flat end versions of the shape. This is clearly the rounded end version. Tsugaru-nuri is, nuri in Japanese means lacquer, if my understanding is correct. Tsugaru is a region in Japan in the Aomori prefecture, if I'm remembering all of my data, my research properly. And this is an area where kind of the masters of urushi lacquer come from. Kara-nuri is a style of decoration or a style of painting. And this is the Kara-nuri finish. Now you'll notice it has an almost organic, it almost looks kind of like, the culture of a culture dish or something with bacterial growth or things like that. It's a beautiful, beautiful finish, but this is called the Kara-nuri finish. And this is the wine color of the Kara-nuri finish. Now, there is a model number for this pen. It is KR5BG. So if you're looking for it, that's one thing to keep in mind. I got this pen from Chatterley Luxuries at the DC Pen Show in 2015, and it is one of my favorite pens. This absolutely would have made the top 5 in Season 3 if I had reviewed it by Season 3, but because of my rule that I can only rank the pens that I've done a review for, this one did not make the cut. It almost certainly will make the cut in Season 4 because I have almost never had this pen uninked since I bought it. So, let's go over the design a little bit. As you can tell, it's a pretty standard shaped cigar pen. It is a fairly large pen. It's made with this, it's got the Danitrio clip, which is, it's got Danitrio, which is kind of engraved right there. It's a pretty firm clip, but it's, they kind of slot into the side of the cap and it's attached internally. The finish on this pen is kind of interesting. So, as I mentioned in the intro, urushi is made from the sap of the Toxicodendron verniculifluum tree. This pen takes 48 layers of urushi to complete. And so what they'll do is they'll put kind of a base coat down, then they will thicken some of that sap with egg whites or rice flour and kind of glop it on the outside edges. Then they'll cover it with several additional layers of lacquer, in different colors. They might use gold dust, or this has green, it's got red, they've got gold dust kind of, you can see here, kind of embedded in one of the layers, and then they'll finish it off with a clear layer and kind of polish it up and sand it down, and it's really quite a lovely finish, but that's how you get that kind of in-motion organic feel to the finish. Made of ebonite, so it is pretty light, but shape-wise, it's not terribly interesting. What makes this pen is the finish itself. Open up the cap, you've got some nice threads, and I forgot to do this, but it is 1 3/4 of a turn. You've got a really, really nice 18 karat gold nib with a really pretty bicolor finish on the nib with the Danitrio Fireball logo. And it's just says Danitrio and then 18K 750 and M for medium. It's a medium nib, number 6 size. Fairly certain this nib is manufactured by Bach, but I don't know that for certain. I'm just fairly certain. That's what I've seen from some of the forums online. So the section it's almost cylindrical. It tapers a little bit, but it's almost got a convex shape to it instead of the standard concave shape. It's just very slight. I mean, you're pushing it there, but really quite comfortable in the hand. And the threads are high enough up that in the hand I don't find myself on the threads really ever. The tenon of the section is made of ebonite. The threads are ridiculously smooth and very well polished. As far as I can tell, this pen is eligible for eyedropper conversion if you so chose. I've never done it. I've never seen the need. Otherwise, it is just a standard international cartridge converter. Comes with a Danitrio, or this one's a Trio branded, but a Danitrio branded standard international converter. The pen can post. I do not post it really. It's quite long when posted, so I don't find it posting. Plus, I just do not want to mar the finish on this pen. So while it can post, I never do. When it comes to writing, I have to say this Danitrio nib is something special. Now, on the surface, it would seem like just any standard 18 karat gold number 6 Bach or Jovo nib. It's, on the surface, it doesn't seem like it's very special. There's something about the metal alloy in this particular pen, though, that makes this the softest 18K nib I've ever used. Now, that is both good and bad. On the good side, when I write, I get a lot of natural bounce and a lot of ink flow. This is a very wet pen, and I'll show you that in just a second. On the downside, though, 18K nib, you have to be careful with an 18K nib that is this soft. It is not, this is a nib that you could very easily spring. So you want to be careful that you're not trying to push the softness, that you just let the softness happen. And that can be a little tricky if you're not used to a pen with a really soft nib. I would put this particular 18K nib in about the same place as a Visconti Dream Touch nib, but perfectly adjusted. I mean, it is juicy, it is super, super smooth, but you can spring it, and I know because I have. I actually ended up having to send this pen off to Mike Masayama to have him repair it for me because I pushed too hard in testing the nib to see where I could go, and I sprung the nib. I've never done that before on a nib. This is the first time I've really, truly sprung a nib, and so I don't do that anymore. I've learned since then that, 18K nibs, feel free to enjoy whatever bounciness is in them, but don't try to flex them because that's not what they're meant for. So anyway, let's go ahead and I'll show you how this writes now. So as I mentioned, this nib is very, 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 very smooth. Just a really nice bounce. You can see here, I'm not pushing it very hard, but even still, you can see there's some give in the nib. And you'll notice right here how much ink pops out when you just get a little bit of downward pressure. I mean, you get a lot of ink in this nib. So if you've got a highly shading ink, this is a pen that likes an ink that shades a lot. This is one of my favorite pens to use for Caran d'Ache Grand Canyon or Diamine Autumn Oak. Oh my gosh, Autumn Oak in this pen is spectacular. I'll use turquoises a lot in here, especially the highly shading ones like Visconti turquoise or Konpeki, because they love this pen. It is a round nib, so you're not going to get a lot of line variation in terms of vertical versus horizontal, but man, oh man, is this thing smooth. Now, this is particularly smooth for me simply because I had to send this off to Mike Masayama to fix my stupidity. But even before I did that, it really was a lovely nib. The feed is able to keep up with the wet ink flow, and speaking of wet ink flow, I mean, this pen, this nib is just, I'm going to give you a quick example here. It's just bouncy and smooth and wet and juicy. It is lovely. I love this nib. But the feet can keep up with it. Now, I said I haven't eyedroppered this because I haven't found the need. I will say that on the downside with a pen this wet, I can go through a converter of ink. It only takes, this is not a pen where you want to try to get 20 pages of writing. If I'm lucky, I get 6 to 8 pages of writing out of a full converter of ink on this pen because it is so juicy. Now, I happen to like that, and I always happen to use really nice paper, so that's good for me, but it might not work for you as well. Reverse writing, it writes really well, quite smooth. It would be a Western extra fine is kind of what I would call that, but really quite well. A little bit on the drier side, quite a bit more on the drier side, so if you needed to turn it over and use it upside down, you could. Yeah, it writes really, really well. It is also quite comfortable in the hand. You get the girth of a pen that is a little bit bigger, but not so much bigger that it feels uncomfortable, with the lightness of ebonite and the warmth of ebonite, which I just love. I really enjoy using an ebonite pen. And then you get to sit there and stare at this gorgeous Kara-nuri finish on this pen, which is quite robust. I've had the pen for almost a year. It doesn't have any scratches. It doesn't have any nicks or anything like that. Now, granted, I've been pretty careful with the pen, but my initial thought was Urushi over Ebonite, this thing is going to scratch like crazy, and it's really held up. So I have to say I'm very pleased with this. Now, Danitrio pens kind of run the gamut in prices. And because it's not a standard production line pen, I can't give you an exact price for one pen or the other. Their pens tend to go up in price, I think, after after they're no longer in production, if it's a particularly popular model. Some of them are worth tens of thousands of dollars, some of them are worth several hundred. This is one of the least expensive Danitrio pens I have ever seen. This lists on their website for about $660 US, which is about what I paid for it when I bought it. I didn't get it for much off of list. I would probably spend even more than I did to get another one of these pens, but I don't care for the color combinations of the Kara-nuri, some of the other ones that I've seen out there. This wine colored one is really my favorite, and I really, really like it. So with a pen like this, and I say this often, but it's true, with a pen like this, you're not just buying a writing instrument, you're buying a work of art. You're buying the work of a master craftsman. And this finish is just gorgeous. It shows a real sense of organicness and artistry on top of being a really, really spectacular writing instrument. So love this pen. This is the Danitrio Takumi Tsugaru-nuri Kara-nuri pen. Kara-nuri. I kind of don't hit the hard R's like we Americans do. Great pen. If you can find one, I highly recommend it. Well, that should do it for this review. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to head over to penhabit.com to check out the additional photos, the written review. Check out the Pen Habit web shop where you can find the currently inked notebooks. We've got new ones. We've got more coming out soon. They're really, really great notebooks, fountain pen friendly with sustainable wheat straw paper. So if you're into looking for some notebooks, either pocket notebook size or traveler notebook size, head over to penhabit.com. Thank you to the Pen Habit sponsors as always, and we will see you here next time on the Pen Habit. Bye.